So I'm climbing up this hill in China, and I don't really know what's here, if anything. My dad's leading the way, and I can kind of see something in the distance, but I can't quite make it out. Oh, I'm sorry, where are my manners? I'm Mark Tan, as they introduced. I'm a Chinese-Filipino student at Xavier. But usually, when I introduce myself to a group of people, I tell them that I'm a writer. Now, I say I'm a writer, and that's because I love stories. So, as a writer, I'm always working to improve my craft. So, one day I was sitting here in this talk by an author named Adan Jimenez, and he was talking about character and what makes and how to make a good character. He said, in a rough paraphrase, it's your responsibility as an author to know the whole story of your character. So to appreciate a character or to understand a character, you have to know his story and a bit more. You have to know his backstory too. The best characters are the ones with the strong backstories. And that's what I figured out and agreed. But it got me thinking, aren't we just the characters of our own stories? Aren't we the writers of our own stories? Isn't every moment you're spending out there just another word, another sentence being written down? Well, that story I was telling you a while ago, I'll get back to that. But let's start at the beginning. So, as a child, I had a lot of questions. And one of these was really bothering me, that up to today, or up until recently, I needed a solution. Now, like I said, I'm a Chinese Filipino, but I come to Xavier School every morning, and during the flag ceremony, I go sing the national anthem like we did a while ago. For 13 years, I've been going, and when they ask us to, I raise my hand and I say the pledge. Iniibig ko ang Pilipinas, aking lupang sinilangan. I love the Philippines, the land of my birth. But, believe it or not, I do look in the mirror every once in a while. And I did that in the past. And when I did, I came to this disturbing conclusion. It's that I don't look very Filipino. When someone sees me on the street or anywhere, he's not going to point me out and say, that guy is 90% Chinese and 10% Filipino. No, he's going to come up with the conclusion that I'm Chinese. A phrase I hear a lot is actually, Chinese ka, diba? So, from that standpoint, it's one way or the other. Now, I live in a society, and in this society, it's mostly Chinese. And though my parents do a very good job of telling me in word that I'm both, that I'm Chinoy, Chino and Filipino, Chinoy put together, it couldn't feel that much more different. It's as if there's always been this divide, like there, where there's the Filipino and the Chinese. And I'm right there in the middle, somewhere where they don't meet. And so, I asked my dad, actually, Dad, where are we from? Because I wanted to know the reason why I didn't fit in, why it seemed like I didn't make any sense as a person. Because it really bothered me. Because I was like this stranger in a strange land. There was nothing there that made me feel like I belonged. And he looked at me and said, well, son, we're from China. And it gave me a sort of a realization. Okay, so I'm Chinese. I come from China. So maybe I belong in China. I'm not supposed to belong here in this country because I'm Chinese. I should be in China. Well, I attended a couple of XEEs, so that's a program that sends Xavier students to China for a month to study. And the realization hit me like a brick when I got there. And it didn't take me that long to figure it out either. All I had to do would be to walk inside a store, and the first thing the person would ask me is, where are you from? I realized I didn't walk or talk or dress like any of the Chinese people. To be honest, I think I'd sound more normal if I just spoke in English than if I tried to go and ni hao everybody. So there was that. In China, I felt more Filipino than I ever did in my life. But here in the Philippines, I'm Chinese. And over there, I'm Filipino. So I'm going to ask you, what's up with that? Oh, well, anyway. So I asked my dad again over and over, Dad, where are we from? And he says, again, son, we're from China. And we go over this cycle a couple of times until I asked him, and he told me the whole story. So when my grandfather was a kid, he migrated from a small coastal village in Fujian called Jiuzhun and came over to the Philippines, and he started his life here. Now, when I heard this, I felt like something was starting to shift, like there was a gear moving into place. And I asked my dad, Dad, can I go to Jiuzhun? And he looks at me and he's like, you want to go to Jiuzhun? And he tells me, when I went there, there was nothing there. There were no cars. It's just houses made of stone. There were a few bicycles, and that was pretty much it. And I looked at him and I thought a while for my response. And I just told him, Dad, I ought to see it. We came from there. I think I should see where I came from. And he studies me from head to toe. He's like, what is this boy thinking? And then he says, okay, I'll tell your Angkong about it. Angkong is my grandfather. So he comes back later in the evening and he tells me how it went. And my Angkong said, yes. But he told it to me this way. When my dad asked if I could go to Jiuzhun, he said my Angkong's face lit up in a way that he'd never seen in a very long time. And it turns out, or as it turns out, the reason for it is among the 6 or so kids of my grandfather and the 12 or so grandchildren, I was the one that asked where we came from. And I was the one who asked if I could see it. And so, in that instant, it was decided that the 3 of us, me, my father, and his father, and that's 3 generations, would be heading home, back to the street where we began. So, in December of 2012, my family and I take the flight to Xiamen, and spending the night, and then the next day, we drive by car, a few hours off, into the village. And it might be a good time for me to mention that I don't speak the local dialect. I don't speak Hokkien, even if that's pretty much all that my grandparents speak. So you can imagine as I get there, though my Mandarin has improved, it isn't really helpful. So when we arrive, I'm just like, yes, yes, no, no. And I feel like I feel even stranger than I did at home during our dinners with my grandparents. But anyway, we go around and we see the village. And at one point in the trip, we're in a car, and we're driving through this road. And on this road, there's nothing on the right. It's just an empty grass field, and on the left, it looks like an empty hill. And in the middle of relative nowhere, I'm just sitting in the back of the van with my iPod on, and suddenly the car stops. And I'm like, why are we stopping? And my dad, in the front seat, he leans over the back and says, I have to show you something. So, in the middle of relative nowhere, he has to show me something. Okay, so we hop out of the car, and he starts going up the hill. So, we're back where we started. So I'm here in China. I'm climbing up a hill. I don't really know what's here, if there's anything here. My dad's leading the way, and I can sort of see something in the distance, but I'm not quite sure what it is. But with every step closer, the image gets more clear. And eventually, I'll come to realize this is something that I'll never forget in my life. So I'd like to share it with you. This is my great-grandfather's tomb. Yeah. Now, you might notice that on the tomb, on the back, there's a plate. And I'll zoom in on it. And on the plate looks like this, kind of. In Chinese tradition, on the plate, the names of people are written. These are the names of each generation that has followed the person buried here. So, if that's my great-grandfather, my grandfather's generation, my father's generation, and my generation, all of our names are written there. And you can see, actually, there, in the circle, that's my name. That's my name, and that's a tombstone. And I'm there. So, I mean, I've never been to this hill before. No one's ever told me about this tomb, and I've definitely never seen it before. And don't even tell me who put my name there, because I really don't know the answer. But none of that really matters, because my name is right there on that tomb. Well, how about that? In any case, let's play a game of spot the difference now. On the right, that's a cropping of my name from the tomb. And on the left is a picture of my Chinese homework. Yeah. So I'll zoom in on the characters, and they actually end up looking like that. So there's two differences that you can see here. Number one is that the middle character is different, and I'll explain why. The practice of my Chinese village is that with every generation, the people in that generation all share the same middle character. So everyone in my generation has that character, the Tian, while here I had my own name given to me by my grandparents. At the same time, though, you might notice that on the homework, it's just one name. But on the tomb, right there, I'm with a lot of people. And I've never met a lot of the people on the tomb, to be honest. A lot of the people, even in my generation, I've never met them. And yet, here we are together on this tomb in the middle of relative nowhere. And I'm tied to them in a bond that really can't be explained. It's something more than just meeting someone. It's that the actions of someone who came long before us tie us together. And it can't be overwritten and it can't be broken. So, I belonged to this family all this time. I was born into this. And all it took was for me to finally realize that I was part of something like this. I was part of these people. I was part of something much bigger than myself. Now, you know, a lot of people have been taught this, and this is still in the curriculum. I mean, you're all familiar with this. It's not a heartbeat, I'm sorry. It's a plot structure. So you'd start at the beginning, and there'll be a middle, and then there'll be an end. But from what I've learned, I find that if our lives are to be treated as stories, it doesn't seem to be the best way of representing it. Actually, in writing, there's a technique called in medias res. This is Latin, and when translated, it means into the middle of things. Now, you can argue that our stories begin at birth, and that is true, of course, because what comes for our story before birth. But it is equally true that our stories begin in the middle of things. Time didn't wait for us to take our first breath before it started. All these people, all these stories, all these things have been going on for who knows when. And we're just one blip when we enter the thing. Now, there's it. I've only probably ever considered my own story when I thought about the world. Everything was me. But I realized after going through this experience that my story is just one of the millions and billions of stories. That I'm just part of this web. I'm just one string in this web of events and memories that are all interconnected. And it's so big and so beautiful. And I'm just one thing there. But I'm a part of that. And I feel amazed. Understanding that gives me a sense of purpose. Knowing where I belong and who I stand for gives me an idea of why I'm here in the world. Now, people came before me, and it's safe to say that they're gone, but at the same time they're not, because they live on through me. My great-grandfather and his father, their stories continue because I'm here. Now, whatever glory or merit that I earn, it's part of them too, and I'm very proud of that. And this is my identity. And among billions of individuals with their own amazing stories, with their own tales and character and everything to tell, this is who I am. And this is who I stand before the world. I'm not just Filipino, I'm not just Chinese, and then funny enough, I'm not just me. I'm part of something that's so much bigger. People look everywhere for happiness. They look at music, they look for art. look at food, look at memories, they look at places, events. Happiness is when you go to the vacation or when you go to the spa. It's also that bottle of water in the middle of the day when you're under the sun. For me, happiness is that scoop of ice cream, vanilla. For me, happiness is when you see her smile. But at the same time, there's a completely different kind of happiness. And it can't be explained. That sense of belonging, that sense of understanding who you are among everything, that sense of feeling whole and feeling connected and knowing your place. It's beautiful, and I don't think you can find it anywhere else. These things are all good, but this happiness is different. And that's what I'm sharing with you today. Now, novels begin with a single word, and journeys begin with a question. If you've ever felt disconnected or alienated or strange in wherever you began, maybe you should just think, and maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to ask yourself the question. Because before you write or before you read a story, it first is waiting just to be lived. Thank you.